Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about a big topic, the future of data analytics. We'll take a look at where we are now, and we'll make some fearless predictions about where the data sector is headed next year and in the years ahead. To discuss that, I'm joined by a very special panel of industry thought leaders. With us today is Radhika Krishnan, Chief Product Officer and General Manager at Hitachi Vantara. Radhika, hello to you.
I am doing very well. Thank you, James. Pleasure to be here.
Torsten Grabs is Director of Product Management at Snowflake. Hello to you, Torsten.
Hi, James. Pleasure to be here.
Krishna Subramanian is the Chief Operating Officer at Komprise. Krishnan, happy Friday to you.
Same to you, James.
And rounding out our panel is Barry McCardel, Chief Executive Officer at Hex Technologies. Barry, welcome aboard.
Hey, James. Thanks for having me.
So I know we want to look ahead and see what the future of data analytics is, but first let's look at where we are now in the year 2022. Obviously, it's been a very big year. A lot has gone on. Hopefully post-COVID, digital transformation, a lot of trends going every which way. What was a big theme that shaped the data analytics sector this year? Radhika, what have you seen?
Sure, James. I think there have been several things at play this past year, right? I think the biggest recognition, especially with the economic environment kind of evolving the way it has, is more organizations recognizing the need for transformation and the need for data to be driving that transformation, right? And so as customers have looked at, what is holding them back, there are many considerations across technology, across organization, culture, strategy, etc., which have kind of come into play. And it's also interesting to see, one of the statistics that gets thrown around is apparently in most organizations, anywhere up to 90 to 95% of data is going unused, right? It's dirty or it's not clean. And so, the recognition around the criticality of data, the criticality of getting it right, and the criticality of being able to derive the right kind of insights to drive transformation seems to be the biggest theme that has emerged in this past year.
Definitely. Torsten, all that data not being used, it seems heartbreaking, doesn't it? And what do you see in the year 2022, in addition to that disappointment?
So certainly that resonates with me, with Radhika just shared. I think the big piece for me that stood out in 2022 was that collaboration over data became super critical for organizations, and having access to more data and to more relevant data made businesses just more successful. And a lot of the old techniques that people used to share data, they were no longer acceptable for organizations. Like creating data extracts and sharing them over FTP or email was no longer considered best practice or standard. So data platform vendors had to catch up with that and really make data sharing, data collaboration, data marketplaces first-party experiences in their offerings. And I think that really became mainstream in 2022 for organizations and businesses.
I think I'm glad that we can no longer share data by email. That seems like a bad idea. Krishna, your sense of the year 2022, a lot went on. What did you see in the data sector that is changing things?
I agree with everything Radhika and Torsten said. And the one thing I will add to it is that the biggest thing that has caught customers by surprise, I think, is the rise of unstructured data. Because now 85% of the data we're talking about isn't sitting in a database or isn't in a semi-structured format even. It isn't a Parquet file or a CV, or a Excel file. But what you're really seeing is video data, genomics data, self-driving car data, audio recordings, unstructured data. So the biggest thing in 2022 that we saw is customers starting to recognize that with all the supply chain problems and all the need to drive more efficiency, they have to do better data management of unstructured data. And then they have to index and extract value from unstructured data. So I think there's greater recognition in the data analytics space. And I know many of my peers here, their companies are also coming out with technologies to better handle unstructured data. And I'm very excited by that trend. I truly believe, not just for the next year, but for the next decade or more, we're going to see a rise of unstructured data.
Barry, your sense, what happened in 2022 that really matters in terms of data analytics?
I'll build a little bit on what Radhika said. For me, I think it was about impact and ROI. I think as the macro outlook shifts, as higher interest rates kick in, there's more scrutiny on capital expenditures, and companies are going to be more skeptical of underwriting pure R&D projects that aren't showing real ROI. And so a theme, I think, in the last few years is that we've gotten really good at bringing data together with technologies like Snowflake and modern ETL. You can bring and structure incredible scales of data. And a lot of customers are there now. They're bringing their data into these environments. But in 2022, I think the question that just increased in urgency was like, now what? Okay, we've got all this data together. How are we able to use that to actually drive impact? How do we measure that? And I think there's a burden now to prove that data and ML and AI can create real bottom line impact for organizations. You have these data teams, you have these data assets you've invested in. What are they putting out? Is it impactful? Is it actually helping us drive better decisions? And so lots of things can contribute to this, but as I spend time with our customers, this is the big headline I'm hearing. And I think there's a hunger for solutions that can really help drive impact from data and bring that to a reality.
Yeah, certainly the sort of the impatience with the R&D products, I would think would be a major factor going forward. With that, we always hear all these headlines about recession and hard times and budget cuts. So let's do less R&D. I would think would be a theme. Looking ahead to next year, I mean, what is going to be a key data analytics trends that they really expect to grow next year? Torsten, what do you see if you look into your crystal ball?
Yeah, so I mean, the trend that we saw in 2022 around data collaboration, data sharing, my take is it's going to extend far beyond just data and static data assets into the logic, the functionality that knows how to derive insights from that data that's being shared across companies. And similar to the data marketplaces, I expect that we're going to see an uptick in marketplaces sharing and collaboration over functionality, over machine learning models, data science capabilities that are built by one organization, but then are reused by a number of organizations on the same data or similar data assets that are being passed around. So, and I think that's gonna be very impactful, kind of thinking about the ROI argument that Barry made, is because you can much more quickly demonstrate the impact of your data science and machine learning practice when you are picking up pre-built models, pre-trained models from a marketplace, apply them to your data. And it also requires less expertise in the core ML functionality from your technology team. So that's something that I'm very much looking forward for the next year.
Mm-hmm. Krishna, what would you add in terms of what's going to be a big trend in the year 2023 that you expect to grow in the data sector?
I do agree that, collaboration is becoming, more prevalent. I think for a long time, we've talked about citizen science as opposed to data science, like how can you make everybody a data scientist? And finally, we're seeing that starting to happen. And we're seeing greater collaboration between IT and departmental users, whether it's departmental research users or data scientists, or even for security, compliance, and governance. That's another area where we're seeing greater collaboration, because increasingly, if you think about sharing more data, you have to do it in a secure way. I mean, on the one hand, you want to share more data, but on the other hand, you have all these, ransomware issues and data governance issues and data privacy issues. So I think there's a lot of, so that's why I think, a path for this might be a notion of smart data workflows. How do you efficiently enable data workflows across the edge, data center and cloud, across organizations, across departments? I think we're going to start seeing data analytics evolve more into a data workflows as opposed to being a point solution in a continuum.
Okay. Barry, your sense for the year 2023, what's going to be big next year for data?
Well, I think, extrapolating sort of what I was saying about what we've seen this past year is I think that ability to connect data and insights to actions and decisions is going to be really, really important. And we see this a lot. We see, companies have, again, they've invested in data infrastructure like Snowflake. They've hired data scientists and analysts. but they're not making decisions differently. And it's not because the data isn't there, the technology doesn't work, or the teams aren't doing great things. It's like much more mundane. It's like the insights are just living in a PDF in someone's email, or like a CSV in a Slack, or a screenshot in a deck that's buried on someone's desktop. And so I think you can have all the data and all the data scientists in the world, or the most powerful AI models, but if this is how you're functioning, you're not going to get much out of it. So Torsten's been referring several times to sort of cross-organization collaboration and being able to share data and models. I'm thinking about this a lot within organizations, of saying, you know, how are you actually connecting the work a data team is doing to a decision? How are you getting those feedback loops happening? What's that impact look like? And I think the next year is really going to be about that. And there's going to be all sorts of amazing technical things around new models and new abilities to scale and all of this. But there's almost these much more mundane, less sci-fi things about just getting really good at actually taking the things that people are doing every day and connecting it to a decision that are going to be the biggest single thing that I think will make the difference.
You know, on that point, I have been amazed. I think there's still plenty of executives that are continuing to make decisions based on, you know, gut instinct and how they sort of feel about things. And I think that may never go away, but I think it's one of the unsung stories about data is that data is great and it's shiny and helpful, but the reality is a lot of decisions are made only partially by looking at the metrics. Agreed, Barry? Yeah.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And you know, there's a thing I've seen many times in my career, which is like, you know, an executive will be like, we want a machine learning model to create a prediction. And it's like, okay, if the prediction's different than what your intuition is, would you follow it? And it's like, maybe, maybe.
Right.
But I think what I see with this, James, and the interesting insight is it's not that these folks don't want to be data driven. I mean, if you look at the investments organizations are making, it's clear that they believe in the prospect of data and analytics helping them make better decisions. I think of a lot of it comes to how are they actually able to work with the data teams. There's this thing we see constantly at customers. It's like, you know, the data team, you know, a question will come from an executive, and then the data team scrambles to go and answer it. And they're running a query over here and downloading a CSV over here and running a notebook and a script over here. And they're screenshotting charts and exporting everything into a PDF, and they send it over to the exec. And the exec says, well, what if this was a 5 instead of a 7? And that feedback loop will take like a week to get the new answer back. And so at that point, like, it's just the friction and the sort of lack of tight feedback loops around that, I think, make it just hard to like work that way. And so I get excited a lot, and you know, this is part of what we do at my company, is about how you connect those data team members to the stakeholders to help drive those decisions better and tighten those feedback loops. Because I'm a big believer that if you can bring those folks together, you can make the feedback loops tight, you can make these workflows really collaborative and help people build and share knowledge, you're going to be able to drive those decisions better, at very least for the folks who are excited and open to using data to drive their decisions.
Yeah, the other thing I did want to say, sorry, James, I just want to add one more point, because I think what you said is very interesting. You know, I often find with processes that changing human behavior is the hardest and takes the longest. And that's where I think we should not underestimate the rise in machine learning, because I think the first application, the first area that's becoming highly data-driven is actually machine learning and adaptive automation. Because how can you teach a machine to do things better based on data, based on historical data and heuristics, and teach it to learn kind of more like a human, right? And I think a lot of this data analytics, especially unstructured data analytics, a lot of it is to advance machine learning because machine learning relies on that data.
Mm-hmm. Radhika, I certainly want you to weigh in on the question of you know, what's coming up in the year 2023. Any thoughts on this current idea of whether executives are really using the metrics or whether they're using their emotions?
You know, James, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's always going to be a combination, right? But I think there are the unique thing that's emerging as there are actually use cases, applications for data in ways that we've never conjectured before, right? And you know, I'll use the example of the industrial universe where, you know, there are essentially automation, you know, insights that are being derived by machine learning and data with the use of digital twins, you know, the metaverse and so on. That is just staggering, right? So I think you're always going to have a balance of both. As I look ahead into 2023, James, I completely agree with my co-panelists, right? I think organizations will be forced to be much more deliberate about their data strategy, where, you know, it's kind of fallen where it has. Now they're going to have to think about, how they get that collaboration and that efficiency into it. The other thing I'll point at as well as in terms of things that I foresee might change going into the future is really the amount of analytics required at the edge, right? And irrespective of which vertical, which industry you're looking at, whether it's banking or retail or industrial environments, there is more and more of that need to have, data collection at the edge, data analytics at the edge, and definitely see that kind of evolving and driving some of the architectural considerations and the culture and the strategy and everything else that my co-panelists referenced as well.
No doubt, the edge is just an explosion of data. That's like, I mean, it's just exponential beyond exponential. All right, let's look further ahead. Let's look, later in the decade, 2027, 2030, whatever, just some distant year. If you're looking further out, what's a key data analytics milestone we can expect? Barry, what would you guess if you really look far out?
I'll pick up on a thing that come up that I think Krishna was mentioning a little bit about ML and how there's a lot of ML projects that have worked, and there's things that are out there that work, and there's companies that have certainly wielded ML really well. The milestone I'm going to be looking for is ML really becoming part of the decision process at companies. I don't think we're there, and I think 99% of companies that are doing anything with ML actually aren't there. I think there's a lot of challenges to this. There's actually productionizing ML. There's explainability, which is actually maybe the biggest problem when it comes to actually using it in practice, which is the model says X. X is unintuitive to me as a decision maker. Do I trust this? Why is it saying X? Oh, it's a black box model that you can't explain. These are really big challenges. And so I think I'm going to be looking for a milestone around how this stuff actually comes to life and is part of the daily workflows. There's been some limited applications where it's true. I mean, if you now want to do image recognition, ML is a great solution for that. But again, for making a decision on like how much inventory to order for next quarter, it's not clear to me that most organizations are in a place where even the most advanced ML or AI models are really plugged into their decision processes on that. And I want to see that change over the next few years. I think there's a ton of potential there, but we're in some ways very far from that still.
Radhika, what do you see if you look further out? We're into flying cars, space mobiles. What do you see further out with data in this decade?
I think data is going to be powering all of the above, right? We already see the power of data, whether that's the metaverse or the autonomously driving vehicles and so on and so forth. One of the big challenges the industry's had for the longest time is and I'm going to go back to the industrial context here for a moment. James, is just this notion of being able to contextualize data effectively, right? And I was at a conference sometime back where we were talking about this notion of data puddles or data tar pits, which don't really come together to deliver meaningful data. And as we look ahead, the hope is that that level of contextualization can automatically happen, and that in turn starts to help you bridge across multiple clouds and data centers and edge systems, and starts to enable the kind of use cases that we're talking about, right? Whether that is could be smart cities, smart buildings, electric vehicles, on and on and on. I think there's multiple things that can get enabled through that ability to harness the data.
Krishna, your guess as you look further out in the decade, what's going to be something large out there that a major development in the future?
Well, maybe it may sound controversial, but I am going to make a claim that we are not going to be able to keep all the data we generate. We're already kind of at that point, and it's only going to get worse. Radhika talked about the edge. I think 90% of data generated at the edge will have to get culled and extracted and deleted or refined, because there's just too much data. We don't have the space to keep it all. We are just starting to talk about sustainability. Sustainability is going to become a way bigger theme than we all think. It needs to, because our own survival depends on it. So I think a major thing we're going to see with data analytics and data management overall is intelligent extraction and curation and summarization and deletion of data. People have kind of kicked the can down the road forever on that topic, but it's coming home to roost now.
Yeah, I sort of can't deal with the idea of deletion of data. I mean, I've got some, car insurance records from 2002. I don't want to let go. I need to keep those records for some reason. I'm not sure why. So I think
Yeah, it's important by
businesses are either,
feature.
we
Yeah,
don't want to let go of anything.
yeah.
Torsten, what are you going to do with all that data in the future? And what do you see in the future when you see it in terms of a major development?
It's a great call out from Krishna on also the sustainability related aspects of keeping all of that data around. I think what intrigues me is that the situation that we're finding ourselves in reminds me of a somewhat similar situation at the beginning of my career 15, 20 years ago in the broader analytics and BI space, where a lot of organizations struggled to really get the throughput on their business intelligence because it was not yet self-service, right? So you actually had to run a full-blown project to get the insights, to get the reports, to get the dashboards built out to answer your most salient business questions, right? And there was a scarcity of talent that could actually deliver these projects to organizations and businesses. And I think we're in a very similar situation today, if we think about the broader analytics and machine learning and data science space, is that a lot of organizations are bottlenecked on that scarce talent around machine learning and data science. And now imagine if over the next 5 to 10 years, we were able to go through a similar transformation of the industry that happened for business intelligence that made it completely self-service for businesses, for organizations. Imagine that for advanced analytics, for machine learning and data science. That would be hugely empowering for organizations and create just so much more value over all of the data that organizations are bringing together. So if we reach that milestone, I think it will be very, very impactful. And I think the right pressures are in place today to actually make this happen. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, when you talk about self-service, in other words, there's a mid-level sales rep who can suddenly access the data. You don't need to be a data scientist. You can really be a citizen data analyst if it's self-serve. Is that am I hearing you right there?
It's even more than that. We don't want to make the sales rep a different persona. We really want to empower that sales rep to, first of all, have access to the right data and have confidence in the quality of the data that they're using, but then also empower them to run the predictions in a meaningful way over that data so that they themselves can generate the results that they need over the data and then make the appropriate decisions, right? Without having to go through, let's say, an ML engineer or a data scientist with a deep expertise and background in machine learning technology.
Mm-hmm. So lastly, what about a trend in data analytics that companies aren't expecting at all? Something surprising, something the company should be preparing for now they're not expecting. Krishna, what would you say? What's a curveball on the way?
I think, we have not really thought about the ethics of data analytics and kind of the intersection of society and data analytics. But with the rise of machine learning, it's inevitable and we have to. And so I do think that, you said, hey, maybe executives won't use data, maybe they go with their gut. We may have the reverse problem where you just look at it as black and white and only use data to make a decision without imposing kind of a social angle or ethical angle to it. So I do think it is kind of a big unknown, but it is something, as technologists, we've not had to deal with much in the past, but increasingly we'll have to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the issue of explainability, among others. I think no doubt there can be more and more pressure about ethics in data and artificial intelligence. Torsten, your sense of some big curveball, some expectation that is not being met by companies in the years ahead. What could we be preparing for now?
Maybe not so much curveballs, but maybe some organizations are somewhat reluctant to really embrace machine learning because they're afraid of the computational resources that they need to spend on really doing machine learning data science at scale. In particular, if you think about training models, machine learning models over large data sets, and particularly unstructured data, that can be a very costly exercise today. But with the trend towards pre-trained models, pre-built models, and transfer learning, I think that equation is actually going to shift in favor of businesses, because those folks that are building these pre-trained models, they're going to foot the bill for the compute resources to train up the model in the first place. But then this model gets created once and then reused multiple times with maybe some limited fine-tuning training for those organizations that deployed into production eventually. And for those organizations, that will actually dramatically reduce the bill that they have to pay for compute resources for training, because all of that training happens much further upstream in the value chain, right? And I think that's going to be enabling for businesses, because you're amortizing the cost of creating the model over many more consumers, over many more organizations. So that's one thing that I think might be unexpected for a lot of businesses, but it also, I think, points to a big opportunity for us in that space.
So Radhika, what would you say in terms of something that companies aren't expecting that they should be preparing for now in the data sector? What can we be aware of?
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind right away, James, is one of my co-panelists alluded to sustainability in the context of data retention, but there is sustainability goals that companies are getting hit with all across, right? Which is essentially, the way that you solve for it, whether it's getting carbon footprint neutral or what have you, is going to be by using data in an intelligent fashion, right? And so increasingly, I think there's recognition that whether it's data centers, irrespective of which industry you're in, you have to be able to measure, track, evaluate progress against those, sustainability goals. So I definitely see, especially as these things become mandated over time, a shift in better understanding, characterizing data, and using data as a way to enforce sustainability.
Mm-hmm. Barry, your sense, what's an unexpected thing we should be preparing for now?
So we've been talking about ML, AI. I think there's a new frontier that's happening right now around generative AI. That is a huge wave and it's coming for data. And if folks have been following this or not, there's models out there. There's GPT-3 from OpenAI, DALL-E. So GPT-3 is a large language model, can be used for both writing text, but also code. There's DALL-E and Stable Diffusion, which are generating amazing works of art, completely computer generated. And these are all going to change creative workflows across the board. And I think of data and analytics and data science as a creative endeavor. And this is going to have some really wide-ranging impacts. And so, for one, just the current people doing technical data work are going to be able to work faster. GitHub did a study with their Copilot product, which basically incorporates a large language model into an IDE, so like a software developer would be using. And they showed about a 50% improvement in developer productivity with versus without that tool. And so this means less boilerplate, less plumbing, more time doing creative work. And there's a very obvious application to a lot of the types of work and code that data scientists and data engineers are writing every day. But I think more profound is going to be empowering a bigger population to do really incredible things and helping upskill folks with maybe some marginal technical prowess, someone with some basic Python skills, and allowing them to write production grade code. This is happening, and it's going to happen quicker and faster than we really think.
You mean low code, no code? Sorry to interrupt. When you say that, you're referring to low code there, or not necessarily?
Well, it's interesting when you talk about it, because I think we have this in our product today. We have this sort of thing of everything's code. At the bottom, everything's code, but we have a lot of things that we do to make it easier for people to write that code, whether it's intelligent assist features or a full GUI sitting over that. And so when we talk about low code, no code, I think the next paradigm that's going to happen here is that you're going to have people who are low code, or maybe some technical prowess. Maybe they just write Excel functions, which, by the way, is code. And they're going to be able to take that and say, well, I want to do this, but do it in Python and make it work at scale. And you're going to have an AI assistant that allows that will take care of a lot of the work behind the scenes. And the human can do what humans do really well, which is ask questions and think critically and be creative. And so it's going to reduce the amount of code people have to write. And for some people, it will reduce it to zero. For others, they're still going to be working in code, but they're going to have a co-pilot that's helping them do things. And so this really gets to this thing we were talking about with citizen data scientists and democratization and all of this. You can ask and answer a question and have the AI assist you. And the thing that freaks people out when they think about fully democratizing and having a sales rep go and do data science work is, are they going to do it right? Are they going to get to the right insight and the right thing? And I think these AIs can actually be great assistants, where the salesperson could ask just a question, and you can know that it's actually going to be done in the properly structured way. And I think this sounds really sci-fi, if you've been around this industry long enough, you've heard a lot of big promises about AI magically finding all of the insights, needles and haystacks. That's been like 20 years of that stuff, right? But I think this wave, what's happening now, is really profound, and some things are going to change really quickly. Others will take time, but it's an area of intense interest and a lot of excitement right now.
Cool stuff. And I have to thank the four of you, definitely. Krishna, Torsten, Radhika, Barry. It was really great. I learned a ton. Thank you so much for sharing your insight today.
Thanks for the great questions and the interaction, James, as always.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.